Oh, point it at it. Here we go. I think this is a good start. What do you think? I love number 16, by the way. I can hardly pass his statues without. And there were ladies at Abe's monument downtown, and I took their picture, and I told them, now look at him affectionately. And they did. So, kidnappings. All right, this is a subject that isn't really fun, and it's just horrible. And I see, very few people of color really sometimes don't want to hear this. So as much as I wish we could have had a lot more people from the community who were relatives of the people who were here and affected by this war so tragically, so much in fear. These kidnappings were just horrible ordeals. So I'm a kidnapping researcher, and I challenge anybody to tell me they found somebody that knows more than I do. And I'm not trying to be bold or arrogant about it. I want to collaborate. I want to find more. If there is someone else who knows this subject, get them to me. I want to give them what I found. I want to document this stuff. I've got spreadsheets of runaway slaves that were recovered with names of their slave owners, their agents, the reward, the dates. And collaborating with other researchers is what I want to do. So I'm going to share with you some of the things that I found in this whole subject of kidnappings. The Kitty Payne family we're going to talk about at length. There were 7 people here, 3 in Gettysburg, 4 in Arntsville. Amelia McGee and Daniel McGee, this was 1858, downtown Gettysburg. Margaret Devitt, that's Mag Palm. And then Nelson Devine. So these are the ones I found, kidnappings, kidnapping attempts. And I'm going to share some of these with you. So they, kidnappers were in this area. Let's think about where we are. Where are we? Right above that Mason-Dixon line. We're the line between the north and the south. And things were very different on each side. You're here, something isn't okay. You're here, something might be okay, and vice versa. And that border is right where we sit. Adams County is plunked right on the Mason-Dixon line. And agents for slave owners came north of that Mason-Dixon line to recover their runaway slaves. So they knew maybe they were looking for a 15-year-old boy. And if they saw a black 15-year-old boy on the streets and grabbed him in broad daylight, tried to take him back, and they did this. There's accounts that I found. And is this the runaway that you're seeking? No. Oh, would you give me anything for this one? So it was a money-making thing, enslavement. And slaves, enslaved people ran away here. This was where, Pennsylvania was where you could get an education if you were black. There were laws in the South that you couldn't educate yourself there, could get a job here. Later they got the right to vote here, but there were big reasons for if you were enslaved to come into Pennsylvania. So a couple laws I want to talk about real quick. Federal Fugitive Slave Law. This was enacted in 1790 and made even more fines, more penalty in 1850. And it meant that if you aided and abetted a runaway slave, you would be fined or imprisoned, and later both, which meant maybe just leaving water out or giving them information on where to go or feeding them. So freedom laws. So the Federal Fugitive Slave Law said that, and this was a trade-off in concessions to the South. We're going to let you keep slavery, but we're going to give you the opportunity to bring your people up here and get them and bring them back. And Pennsylvania in 1820 said, in conjunction with the Federal Fugitive Slave Law, Pennsylvania is going to require people who recover runaway slaves in Pennsylvania to go to a judge or the justice of the peace so that we have a record of this. There is a written record. So you don't just grab people and take them right off the street. So that's and who was in charge in 1820 in Pennsylvania? Quakers. Quakers, abolitionists. They already knew that, where they stood on this. First organized religion to tell their members you can't own slaves and be a member and be represented in our meetings and so make a choice. And the Gradual Abolition Act of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania was the second state to get rid of slavery. Vermont was the first. Pennsylvania did it, 1780, they signed a law, March 1st, that said, later this year, I think it was November 1st, any runaway, any child born to an enslaved mother in Pennsylvania, if born after November 1st, 1780, then that child will only be enslaved for 28 years. Good? Bad? It's better than nothing, but it was gradual. Key word, gradual. We still had people enslaved here in the 1840s and 50s, many decades after this law was passed. If born before that, you lived your whole life. And we have all those records. There's no doubt about who enslaved people here in the tax records. We have really good information that we've published, and researchers have double-checked that with each other. Warrants for removal. So I printed these in my book. I had a good relationship. I worked in Harrisburg, and Sherry Hammett was kind of like my neighbor, and she knew I liked Black history, African-American history. She'd call me and say, oh, I found some old papers. She worked at the courthouse. And I would go, she'd say, come in on your day off. I have some stuff for you to see. And then she had this packet of these warrants for removals. They were incredible, handwritten. I transcribed them, put them in the book that I published. So we have records of runaways who were recovered here. Not a lot. It's a brief period of time. So there's not a lot. It's not all of them. It's some of them. And slave ads in our Gettysburg newspapers tell us this was where there was a hotbed of activity to recover runaway slaves. And that led to kidnappings. So there were ads like this in our newspaper. This was a $100 reward, and the rewards varied from 3 cents to $250 for 2 men, and they were young men. So the rewards were about the enslaved person. What is their age? What is their sex? What is their skill? What are their skills? And can she bring us more children? Is she of childbearing age? Things like that meant a higher reward. And this is an example. I wrote a book on Yellow Hill, and this is an example of, like the song, The Yellow Rose of Texas, people of mixed race were sometimes called yellow. And this is just, this one was a heartbreaker for me. John Murphy, first of all, was our jailer here in Adams County. And our jailer, John Murphy, put this ad in the Gettysburg newspaper. Runaway Negro was committed to the jail in Gettysburg, Adams County, Pennsylvania, the 10th day of September last. A Negro man by the name of Charles with an iron collar about his neck says he is a slave, the property of William Campbell near Lexington, Kentucky, that he ran away about the 1st of August last. The master is desired to come and take him away. Otherwise, he will be discharged. Are you kidding me? Somebody walked from Kentucky to Adams County with an iron collar around their neck, and then someone brought them into the jail, and the jailer put this ad in the paper? What happened to Charles? Tim Smith and I once were trying to find out, and we went to the jailer's records. It was when they were in the Wolf House, to try to see if we could find anything on whether he was released or claimed or what happened to him. Did they get that collar off? The thinking of the person who put that collar on was, he's not going to run away. He'll stay here because I've got the key to the collar. But it obviously didn't work. Back after many years, this was an interesting story. Larry Bolin found this one, I think, and gave it to me. Oh, it was so good when I read it. And I've got a few copies of this stuff back there. Here we go. Back after many years, this is a good one. So here's an account in our newspaper. Sorry, I don't have the dates here. But it's about a little boy. It's about a man who visited here. And I think the year was 1899. Some of our citizens noticed a colored man whose appearance indicated he was beyond the usual tramp. Passed through Wednesday, he came across Adams County's border after an absence of 38 years, leaving a life since, giving facts which a dime novelist would weave a romance would excel in some respects. Best an imaginary brain could bring to a point of a pen. His name is Nelson Devine. I think it's Devin, Devan. There were tons of black children all over, I found in our census, named Devin, Devan, a black family that lived here. And several of them, I think in our U.S. Colored Troops files, there were 4 Devin sons in the USCT. It was a pretty big family. So I think that is Devin. He went to, 44 years ago, he went to Judge Isaac Wireman in Huntingdon County. Quaker. His house and mill is still there near York Springs. He got him at the almshouse and took home with him little Nelson when he was 6 years old. And one day he was playing outside Squire Wireman's house, and 3 men from the South enticed the little boy into their wagon. Come with us and show us the way to so-and-so's house. And he did, and they took him and enslaved him. This was 1861. Lucky for him. It was near the time that his freedom would later come. And I found him in the census. He was right there with the Wireman family, 9-year-old boy. The dates all matched up. So all my research, everything made sense. So that was one. So who were those men? They'll never be found. Never be found. I found it. It's hard to read, so we'll just skip that. So here's info in the newspapers. This even made it to Salem, Ohio, where there were other Quakers. I found that out through a quilt that we were looking at. So this is about Hartman and Gallagher. Andrew Hartman, Franklin Township, that's an Arntsville name. I know Hartman's. Blaine Hartman was a bus driver at Biglerville. I heard you knew Blaney. Yep, Hartman's. And Mrs. Rice was a Hartman, Chubb's wife. And so we know there were Hartmans up there. And there was a French and Indian War fort, not a fort, like a stockade on a Hartman farm near Arntsville, but that was 150 years before this. So this Gallagher, and I don't know who this is, we know Dan and Ann Gallagher, but I don't think their family wasn't here, so no relation. So they were, after some deliberation, it was determined to haul them down to Gettysburg. They overhauled some runaways. This Gallagher and Hartman. So they were within a mile or so of Gettysburg. It seemed advisable that Gallagher should ride on and make arrangements for reception of the prisoners. The latter had gone a short distance when his wife unloosened the cords that fettered the husband, and he sprang from the wagon and took to the woods and was out of sight before Andy Hartman, I guess, had time to communicate the escape to his comrade. Gallagher turned in fruitless pursuit of the husband, so they got away, and they went into Sheriff Scott. So that's another account that we found. Party of 4, yep. There was another wagon found at the Gettysburg railway station, and the newspaper said, it's as if the people disappeared on the Underground Railroad. The wagon was left and claimed by men from Liberty, Maryland, who lost their wagon and horses, and their enslaved persons left the wagon at the train tracks right here in Gettysburg. So that was another runaway. So these kidnappings are not fun. Magpalm pressed charges. Margaret David, so she's got a couple of different names. Magpalm, she lived with Al Palm. She never probably married him. And there's some information that she was a loose woman. A census taker once called her harlot in the census here. A little bit of opinion in there with her. But she was a large and powerful woman, unloaded baggage at the train station, and supposedly bit the thumb off one of the men that tried to kidnap her. She named those 3 men in court, Joseph Tuckey, and I think she was washing at Joseph Tuckey's. It said Dickinson Township, so I think it's up near Gardner's. And these 3, Ferdinand Buckingham, these 3 men tried to kidnap her. Well, she screamed, yelled, somebody came to her aid, she got away, but she did file charges, and it's in the newspaper in 1858. And in that same article, it talked about Jacob Jones, who was colored, received a rather good drubbing by several women and children to leave by a police officer. He was giving information to slave catchers. And so they took justice into their own hands. Millie McGee also reported that this Jones tried to kidnap 2 of her children. So Daniel McGee is her son. He went later and enlisted in the U.S. Colored Troops. So I've got the articles of this case here. Magpalm, there were 2 of them in the article, or in the newspaper. The compiler, April 26, 1858, was indicted. Daniel McGee, George McGee, John Redding. And do you think they won any of their cases in Adams County Court? First of all, it was amazing they even had a trial. They were not citizens. They were not allowed to sue anyone. But somehow they convinced someone here to hear their trial. So they had the help, and they were probably, Mag was probably illiterate. She was born in the almshouse, lived on the Toot farm. Just interesting accounts of what some of these people went through. And again, Daniel McGee later enlisted in the U.S. Colored Troops. When I looked for these 3 kidnappers, Ferdinand Buckingham was a carriage maker from York, Pennsylvania. And I thought that was quite interesting. You know, there was a large carriage making industry in Gettysburg. And do you know where many of their customers were from? The South. Coming to Gettysburg, we had tanneries, Rupp's Tannery. Why did you need tanneries? Leather seats in the wagons. So there was a large carriage making industry here in Gettysburg. Many of our customers here were from the South. And so there was opposition about slavery and anti-slavery. Moses McLean, our judge, said, "What are you anti-slavery people getting on a hiss about? We've got businesses here that are doing well, something about that. You know, don't be messing with our friends from the South. We wouldn't want to hurt them in any way." So yeah, Ferdinand Buckingham, carriage maker, but York, Pennsylvania, not here. So he was a businessman and decided he needed to make a little more money, but Mag said no. So did she really bite the thumb off of one of the kidnappers? I don't know, but I think she might have gave it a good yank, if nothing else. And yeah, Ferdinand Buckingham. And again, so I'm going to talk about Kitty Payne's son, James. And so now we'll get into Kitty. So there was lots of information about this. This story about Kitty Payne just kind of got under my skin, and it never left. And then I met another gentleman in Virginia who was chasing Kitty's spirit for a long time. His name was Robert Malbacher, and he had a brother-in-law in Gettysburg named Kib Roulette. So I found a letter at the Historical Society from this Robert Malbacher writing to Dr. Gladfelder about this Kitty Payne thing. And he was writing a historical fiction about it, and it said in there, my brother-in-law's Kib Roulette, and I had met him through an organization I served on the board, and I called Kib Roulette, and I always get his wife because he was always golfing. And she would say, "Oh, you'll have to call back later." And I would, and I'd call again, and he's golfing again. Finally, I said, "I'm calling him about this Robert Malbacher." "Oh, yeah, that's his nephew in Virginia." "Well, I want to talk to him about this Kitty Payne." "Well, here, I'll give you the name of his son and daughter." And I called the son. The son gave me all Robert Malbacher's research. I borrowed it like for a weekend, photocopied it, and I learned so much about the Kitty Payne kidnapping. So to him, I'm grateful. Just decades of just wanting to know what happened to this woman. My grandmother lived on Bear Mountain. I was born in Gettysburg Hospital, and our home was at the foot of Bear Mountain. So from day 4, when I was taken out of the hospital, till I was about 4 or 5 years old, I lived in a house right at the foot of Bear Mountain. 2 houses down from my Uncle Loring, where my grandmother lived on their property in a mobile home. So I spent a lot of time at the foot of Bear Mountain because I stayed with my grandmother all summer to play with my cousins and to get rid of my brother. So I loved Bear Mountain. We sledded up there. My dad had a Bronco in the 70s, and he would take us sledding up there. And we'd sled the whole way down Bear Mountain. It was the best. I kept wanting to know. So here's the story of Kitty Payne. Oh, there's so many articles about this. Let me just try to tell it to you as best I can. So let's start in Rappahannock County, Virginia. Rappahannock County, the Maddox family, Samuel and Mary Maddox are the farm owners there. They have a 111-acre farm, and in the slave, and some slaves, they enslaved some people there on their property, 111-acre farm, not a plantation. They had about 10 slaves, so not a real big thing. And a light-skinned child is born in the slave quarters. Mrs. Maddox sees the baby to the mother and knows the only white man around is her husband. They never had any of their own children, but he was obviously the father of this baby. And she wasn't happy about it. And she said, what's done is done. The child can stay, but the mother has got to go. And Kitty's mother was sold away from the Maddox property right after Kitty was born, leaving her half-brother, James Green, who probably didn't already have a father, motherless. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. This is what happened to these children. And it happened a lot. So he, it's just kind of unfathomable when we think of our families that someone could do this. So Kitty grows up with Mary Maddox in the house. One of those talk show hosts got in trouble for talking about a house slave and a field slave, but I'm going to talk about it. There's a difference. You being in the hot sun all day, or you being in the house, doing the laundry, doing the wash, setting the table, cooking. There was a difference. So Kitty was in the house, and her half-brother James Green was out in the fields. Kitty was taken into the house to sleep with the missus. So she favored her, still enslaved. Her husband's child, but still enslaved. Mr. Maddox dies in 1837. His will says, all my property, and unfortunately she was property, all my property goes to my wife Mary to do and use as she should see fit in her natural life. Whatever is left shall go to my nephew, Sam Maddox Jr. Kind of weird, isn't it? We didn't call juniors nephews, but they do in the South. Why? And I've read it in another book. There was a Charles Jr. who was nephew. Why'd they do it? They had no heirs, no one to pass the property on to. A wise brother names his child after, he has a child, he names it after his brother. Wouldn't he be the natural one to get your stuff? Mary Maddox gives him the 111-acre farm for $1, gives it to him. But it's not enough. He had used the slaves he thought he should inherit as collateral on his bad debts. He was a bad businessman, Sam Maddox Jr., couldn't pay his debts, hired a kidnapper, professional kidnapper. Tom Finnegan was hired, and 5 men kidnapped Kitty and their children. So Kitty gets her freedom. Her manumission paper, I'll show you, and it says to perfect freedom, freedom from any person or persons whatsoever. Yet 5 men kidnapped her and her 3 children from Bear Mountain. So Kitty gets her freedom in Virginia. Mary Maddox signs papers in Virginia and Pennsylvania, giving her her freedom. She wanted to make very sure. And Kitty is allowed to marry and have children with a free black man that lives on a neighboring farm in Rappahannock County, Virginia, Robert Payne. We're not sure what Kitty's maiden name was. Something I read in Malbacher's work thought it might be Niggins, Niggins. I'm not sure, because records back then are very hard to come by anyway. So Kitty and Robert, and how did they get married? Like many black people married. Do you know the marriage ceremony? Anybody know how black people back then? Jump the broom, jump the broom, jump over a broom. That's how you make that promise to each other. We're going to have a house together. They jumped over a broom. There's no record of the jumping over the brooms. We don't have maiden names. We don't have dates. We don't have mothers and fathers. And so Kitty had 4 children to Robert Payne. She came to Adams County to live near Fairfield. Mary Maddox lived with her. She lived there for a few months, and little Eliza later said, all we did was eat pumpkin there. I was always hungry, and all they had to eat was pumpkin, so they weren't doing really well. Mary Maddox goes back to Virginia and remarries a man named John Corder, and Kitty and Kitty's son, youngest child, George, dies. It was a baby. In the manumission papers, we'll see baby George's age, and was frail during the journey north and is buried in an unmarked grave near Fairfield, near Mariah Furnace on the Cold Springs Road, right where Thaddeus Stevens had a furnace. They called it Frog Hollow. There's an aqueduct near there, so there are landmarks all over. Robert Payne, her husband, came to join her, and he died. So he's buried in an unmarked grave near Fairfield. Then she moves to Bear Mountain with Aunt Rachel. Aunt Rachel. Don't know how, but she says that's her aunt. So maybe she was enslaved down there with her. And so the kidnapping occurred July 24th, 1845. The kidnappers came to Bendersville, and they knocked on the door of the tavern owner, Charlie Myers. And they said, wake up. You got to feed and water our horses. We'll be back later. And when we get back, we want those horses ready to roll out of here. Feed them, water them. We'll be back in a little bit, and we want to go quick. When they came back, Charlie Myers said he saw Kitty in the wagon and heard the voices of the children. So Kitty and her 3 children were kidnapped. And they said, Amon Jones, they lived with Rachel and Amon Jones. And they said Amon Jones was tipped off that the kidnappers were in the area. They told him they were going to do it, and he complied. And he told Kitty, there's your master's here to get you. It wasn't his master, but it was his master's agents. So Kitty felt betrayed by an aunt's husband, and the ordeal started. They were taken to Virginia. They're placed in the Rappahannock County Jail not as prisoners, but for safekeeping. Then they went to the courts. Cyrus Grist in Adams County paid $100. I have a letter that he wrote to Yardley Taylor from Goose Creek Meeting, Loudoun County, Virginia, a Quaker that he knew from Baltimore Yearly Meeting. And Yardley Taylor writes back to Cyrus Grace and says, we've got an attorney to represent her. Zephaniah Turner was from Pennsylvania, but lived down there. And he was going to defend her in court. There was a long trial, 12 jurors, 7 of the 12 men on the jury were slave owners. The judge, Richard Fields, was a slave owner, and not a very nice one, according to Albert Cook Myers, who interviewed one of the people he enslaved. And she talked about the cruelty of Judge Fields and how she, too, had to fight other enslaved people on that farm for her food, and she was always hungry. She said, Mary Stewart was interviewed by Albert Cook Myers, and she was enslaved by this judge, Richard Fields, who tried Kitty's case in Virginia in 1846. He met with her in 1920. She said, he fed us like pigs. He threw a bucket of stuff in a trough, and we had metal implements with which we could scoop out our portions quicker than the others. And she said, I was always hungry. So did Kitty's fate go well? No. They were arguing over, did Mary Maddox legally inherit? Can a woman own property? Can she free a slave? Was it just for life? Did he really mean those words in the will about everything goes to my wife? And then there's this nephew, and so there's all this discussion. 300 days they're in jail, and it does not go in her favor. There's an appeal and another trial. In the second trial, the nephew raises up in court and says, let her go. I can't afford this anymore. The jailer, Absalom Lillard, was billing the nephew the cost to feed Kitty and the children while in jail. And the poor nephew did not have access to do with them whatever he wanted. And he wasn't going to do it anymore. And after all, he was paying an attorney to defend himself. And he had to pay these 4 men to help kidnap them that night. And the investment just was not paying off. And it was also something about his girlfriend. So I'm not going to go real into this, but Kitty marries Abraham Bryan, who has a daughter, Susan Francis, who is named after Francis, Sam Maddox Jr.'s girlfriend's sister. Okay, I know that was a lot. So I think she's getting it, though. She's writing it all down. But really, this Francis, these two sisters, the Withers sisters, one was dating Sam Maddox, and the other one didn't like anything about him and was saying, you know he kidnapped them. You know she was freed by Mary Maddox. You know that she was given her, you know this, and you still are with this horrible man who does this horrible stuff to these people. And so I think that there was a role there. Kitty, what happened to Kitty? So Kitty gets her freedom again. Virginia Quakers escort her to Quakers here in Adams County. What does Kitty do? She's penniless and afraid to live alone. So she placed her 3 children in 3 different townships with 3 different families. 2 of the 3 were Quakers. And the other one was sending their children to a Quaker school in Bendersville from Hunterstown. I couldn't figure that one out for a while. And then I read something in Albert Cook Myers. And a lot of anybody who's a researcher, go to the West Chester County Historical Society. Albert Cook Myers has a box called Kidnap Kitty. This guy was so crazy. He did the lineage of the jailer in Rappahannock County, Absalom Lillard. I saw it in his notes. And I'm like, Albert, you just go down these rabbit holes. Why did you need to know the lineage of the jailer in 1845 case? And he did. Okay, share with you. Some are easy to read, some are not. This one's just a heartbreaker. This is when Kitty got her freedom. So it's so hard to read. But know all men present that I, Mary Maddox, of the county of Rappahannock, state of Virginia, for all good causes have to emmanuate and forever free by those persons, emancipate and forever restore to perfect freedom. Where's my clicker thing? Oh, I don't know where it is. There, perfect, where is it? Perfect freedom from, can you read that? All person or persons whatsoever is what I'm thinking it says. Benjamin, 53, this is Ben Roberts. And he got his freedom. He married a much younger woman and had a bunch of kids. I followed them, and they're in our census records. James, 37. Kitty, age 27. 27 till she got her freedom. And there's her daughter, Eliza Jane, 5 years old. Mary, age 4. Arthur, 6. George isn't in here. Oh, yeah, George, age 2 months. George, age 2 months. So she had her baby George. Baby George just didn't do well. Buried in an unmarked grave in Fairfield with Robert, her husband. This is 1840, Rappahannock County. So here's the deal, not a plantation. And Kitty is on here. Oh, sorry for all this yellow. I got a little carried away with my highlighter. It didn't do well here. So, but this is the will. I don't know if we're going to be able to glean anything out of this. Don't ask me why I did this. Anything shall be left at my death, my wife, my wish and desire, Mary Maddox, and then my wish and desire to my nephew, Samuel Maddox. But he's pretty clear in that. He says, whatever is left. All my property goes to my wife, Mary, whatever is left. These are the people who testified in Adams County Court on the kidnapping of Kitty Payne. There was a trial here. As well. No, there was not a trial. Sorry. There were depositions. There was never any punishment. No, I'm wrong. There was a trial. There was a trial because Finnegan was held guilty. Finnegan, one of the 5 men, was found guilty. These are all the people who testified. When I saw this gave depositions about it. So there are local Bendersville people, black people, Quakers, non-Quakers. And I could go down the list and tell you who's who. Rachel, there's Amon and Rachel Jones, the 2nd and 3rd. So this is James Wilson. He was a Quaker. Charlie Myers, a tavern owner. Amon Jones, black, married to Rachel from Bear Mountain. Jane Roberts, black, had children. John Rice, white guy, lived on Bear Mountain. George Bender, town founder, Eliza Hewitt, Quaker, James Green, Kitty's half-brother, who later is hanged in the Gettysburg jail for murdering a man on Bear Mountain, April 1st, 1852, Flitting Day, when people were moving out of leased rental cabins. And so on and on. Cyrus Christ there, Jacob Keckler. He's from all the way out here, halfway to Keckler's Hill. Keckler, I don't know, he must have seen the kidnappers or something. George McClellan, he did see the kidnappers in Gettysburg. Isaac Wireman, Jesse Cook, William Wright, Quakers, Quakers, Quakers. There's a Donaldson from over around Fairfield. Martin, that's a Fairfield guy. Not sure about that last name, Staub. This is where Charlie Myers had a tavern. In 1845, the kidnappers came here, woke him up at night, said, feed and water our horses and we'll be back. I put a plaque there that tells the story of Kitty Payne. And if you've never been to the Elkhorn Inn for breakfast, you gotta do it. And why is it so awesome? Scrapple. Did you have the scrapple? Sausage is pretty good, but everything is good. Oh, what did I have there that was so good? Eggs Benedict. Oh my gosh, it was just, oh, so good. So Kitty and I actually visited here, and I went in and met the jailer, and I said, oh, I want to go back in there and look where Kitty Payne, and he said, ma'am, there's 19 prisoners back there. I can't let you in there. But later, I visited, and they built a new jail, and I could go in because they had a new jail, and they weren't using that one anymore. So it was my early visit. I couldn't go in, but later then I did. And I was here with a relative of Kitty Payne's, and a Civil War wayside marker was put there by Civil War Trails about Kitty's story. And we unveiled that marker, and it was the weirdest thing. There was a cat, a little kitty, that would not leave that covered plaque. We're like, whose cat is this? Why was that cat near the Kitty unveiling? It just would not leave, like it knew. There's something really good here about Kitty. But yeah, 300 days. And they had a garden out. They let them out at night, let the children out at night to play. Guess it was a little cooler. And they were allowed to plant things and have a garden. So they weren't there for safekeeping, just trying to figure out what to do with them. So lots of things in the newspaper about this. Finnegan was convicted. But our sheriff wrote to the Rappahannock County Sheriff and said, hey, bring Finnegan. No, I'm sorry, bring Samuel Maddox up here. And the sheriff in Virginia said, we don't see things that way you Pennsylvania people do up there. Nope, not doing it. And he said, we got a trial up here. We want you to bring him up here for trial for kidnapping. He said, I don't want to. And he didn't. So Finnegan was sentenced, and they found him. Townspeople in Gettysburg saw Finnegan on the streets after he was guilty of this kidnapping. And they recognized him. And they said he was ugly as a wolf, and he wore a bandana over his face to try to not reveal his identity. So he knew he was a wanted man. But they knew him, and townspeople chased him down. He was going north, and people chased him, and somehow he turned around and was trying to go back. And someone told the sheriff, and the sheriff put in the newspaper it was his fast horse, old Ben, who caught up and got Finnegan to stop his horse, like fired a horse pistol at him or pulled a dirk knife, something like that is in some of the newspaper articles about this. So Finnegan was sentenced, and he went to Philadelphia Penitentiary for about 1 year and 7 months. People went crazy there. It's a Quaker-run facility, and they wouldn't let you talk. The Quakers who escorted him from the jail to the Philadelphia Penitentiary got him pardoned, got Finnegan pardoned. The same Quakers who put him helped get him found guilty, helped get him pardoned. And then he supposedly went back to his wife and family in Hagerstown, Maryland, and then left his wife and children. But it was interesting, there is info in the newspaper about poor Tom Finnegan's wife waits by the cabin door while Tom Finnegan is in prison. And I'm reading this going, oh, his liberty matters. Cook's Mill. Kitty supposedly did work here. This thing still stands today. Mary Lou and Schultz. The Schultz live right there. They were cousins of my cousins. And I asked them if I could peek my head in there, and they said I could. And the walls are this thick. It's just so cool, right at the foot of Bear Mountain. And somebody painted it. Charles Joyce, did he? Or should he? I told him to. Maybe he didn't. And somebody else was going to paint it, but I don't know that anybody did. So any artist here, you need some inspiration, there you go. Quakers helped out here. Cyrus Christ, who lived in the Quaker Valley, was an Underground Railroad agent, paid $100 to get Kitty defended. That's putting your money where your mouth is. That's a lot of money back then. He also in the first commercial nursery in Adams County. It's where everybody brought their fruit trees. And he's buried here. And this is on the Network to Freedom because Cyrus Christ is buried there. And his role in helping her. This whole thing about Kitty Payne's kidnapping is called the reverse Underground Railroad. When she was kidnapped and taken back, it's the reverse. So he had to get her rescued again. This is his census records where I see Isaac Tudor. Here is Arthur Payne. This is how I found them. Look in here. These are all white people. This is an M for mulatto. There's Arthur Payne. Here, this is John Wright and Ruth and Jane, and there's Mary Payne, 11-year-old female mulatto. Alexander Campbell, like the soup, but this says camel, like the animal. Lived in Hunterstown. There's Eliza Payne, 12-year-old. She lived her whole life with that family. Not her whole life. She lived with that family while they were still alive. When the last dying member of that family died, she left to go with her sister in Michigan, who was working at a Quaker seminary, Raisin Academy. And Eliza was in Hunterstown when Custer came. She hid under the bed of the home she was in to hide from the Confederates who walked in her house. Can you imagine how terrorized she must have been? Because she knew, and it was in the newspaper, no doubt about it. In the Gettysburg newspaper, I do programs on George Sandoe. It was in the Gettysburg newspaper, June 26th, that the Confederates are coming. They've got Negroes in tow. They took free blacks off the streets in Waynesboro and Chambersburg. The black people here were in a frenzy, according to Ladies' Diaries, June 26th, when the rebels first appeared here. They were running for their lives, grabbing their kids and getting the heck out of Dodge. Some went to Yellow Hill. Some went to Chambersburg. Some went to York. Some went to Harrisburg. Some never came back. Some blacks fled and never came back. Here's Mary. And I've met her relatives. Here's Eliza. She also took care of a professor's child at the seminary. Oh, I tried really hard to tell those guys this stuff. And I was at a tour at the seminary, and they talked about Daniel Payne and said, he's the only African-American here on the ridge that we have any of his real words. And I'm like, I gave you Eliza's memoirs telling you. I told Cody Eash, Cody, don't you remember I gave you and Pete Miley, I gave you this stuff, and she was right there on the seminary campus, taking care of the Hay children. A baby was born. She documented his name. She wrote it in her memoirs, which I really can't share widely. I don't let anyone really see them. I have a copy, but they're not mine. They're the family's. So we need to try to get permission, and I have lost touch with Kitty's family, unfortunately. But she was working, I believe, getting educated maybe at the seminary while she was taking care of a professor's baby, and very much a part of that family. And she wrote their names in her memoirs and their dates and talked about being with them for a period of time. Supposedly, Kitty worked at the Gettysburg College. I saw a reference to that, and I checked with their records, and I was never able to prove that. So their little footprint of this family was all over this county. What happened to Kitty after the kidnapping? So she marries Abraham Bryan. I didn't know this for a long time. till Larry Bolin said, Deb, one day I knew you were looking at Kitty Payne stuff, and I looked at the family stuff, and I found Guide My Feet, Hold My Hand, a book written about this whole ordeal by her family and with the help of Albert Cook Myers. Because I've seen his handwriting, very much, I'm sure, they were working together. They absolutely were. I can prove it. It's in the record. So she marries Abraham Bryan. Her name was Catherine. She was called Kitty, more affectionately. Marries Abraham Bryan. She's wife number 2, taking care of children to wife number 1. And she gives him a child. I don't think that William is, I'm not sure. I think Kitty had 2 children to him, but I heard or read that one of the children died and is buried somewhere. And I'm like, oh gosh, don't tell me where. And I don't know where. Maybe Yellow Hill. Maybe there's also an abandoned cemetery up on Laurel Road, north of Bendersville, up towards Pine Grove Furnace. We'll never know who's there, the identities. But this Francis is her child, who married a man named William Henson, who was guarding Jefferson Davis at one time. So she met a man at a Gettysburg reunion who was brought here with the Confederacy, William Henson. And they were acquainted at this reunion. They married. She got, Albert Cook Myers wrote to her and asked her about her husband and things like that. So, and Kitty's children all came here, I think it was 2008, I don't know. I find in the book, and I found something on the internet. Somebody was looking for information, and it was Sandy Kazabuski. Where's Sandy? Sandy's back here. This is Sandy. Oh my gosh, dude, I just adore her. I have lost touch with her from Kewaskum, Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. And she is just so cool. She's an Army vet. These people were so great. I mean, meeting. So the lady who wrote this book is Mary Gandy, and she had 5 or 6 children, mostly female children, one son named Keith. There's Marilyn. I don't know all their names, but these are their children and grandchildren, descendants of Kitty Payne. And they were welcomed here in Gettysburg, and we took a tour of Bear Mountain and went to places where Kitty had placed her children. You know, this is the Alexander Campbell farm here. That's where Eliza went. This is the John Wright farm. That's where Mary went. I never found Isaac Tudor's house. When I was going down to Rappahannock County once to speak, I saw a big billboard for Maddox Funeral Home. And I was like, Maddox, Maddox, same family. So when we had the reunion, I called my friends in Rappahannock County, Virginia, and I said, the Kitty Payne's descendants are coming to Pennsylvania. Would you like to welcome them in Virginia? Yes. They had a reception for them there. They had white Maddoxes related to Samuel, who kidnapped Kitty, and they all met. She's in Arthur Maddox's sports car, the funeral home owner. This is Sandy, the one that I met from Kewaskum, Wisconsin. I'm not sure why did I put this in here? Elsie's cool. She wrote fiction. Maybe it was about Mag Palm. She wrote about Mag Palm, Maggie Bluecoat. And that seems kind of weird that you would put a special coat on to identify yourself as doing Underground Railroad activity. But I think that's what Elsie wrote. Good story. I'm not sure if it was true or not. Elsie wrote a lot of good stories, but she wrote historical fiction. This was just kind of a side note that Frederick Douglass was here, spoke here, but after this ordeal. This is just some good reading. The Fugitive Blacksmith, An American to the Backbone. He was a runaway who came through this area, was educated by the Wrights, cousins of Cyrus Christ. So these Quakers had a big impact here. I think we're going to wrap it up here. This is kind of my closer. These Quakers were getting sick of these people getting kidnapped from their midst, and they wrote about it. And this lady, and note the date, this is after July. This Quaker woman was going down there in Virginia Bible thumping. She'd take her Bible to a Virginian and she'd knock on their door and she'd say, "Hi, you're a good Christian. I can tell. Let's talk about the Bible." And she'd open that Bible up to Deuteronomy and she'd talk about when a slave escapes from his master and comes to you, you should help them. You should bring them in. See here, you should help people who are enslaved. You shouldn't be enslaving them. And here it says you should not oppress poor people. You should feed them. You should take them in. And you see, so you're enslaving people, and that's wrong. And if you want to get to heaven, you got to do the right thing. You got to end this whole slavery thing. And then she writes about it. Oh, her words here are so powerful. The friends in Virginia, more than all others around them, are holding up the light in the world around them. Its beneficial influence is felt and seen in the customs, practices, and cultivation of the county. We of the North know not what it is like to live in the lion's mouth, but we live within reach of its paws. And all our strong cords and cables of laws have not found sufficient to bind him from assaulting our persons and destroying our property, much less to prevent the destruction of our characters among men. We cannot therefore say how or in what manner our southern brother or sister must labor. Their peculiar circumstances must modify their views. This, however, is the truth everywhere. Quote, "Faith without works is dead," unquote. Where are those 5 words from? The book of James. The book of James. What does it mean? If you say it, but you don't do it, it doesn't mean anything. If you say you're a Christian, but you're enslaving people, you're not going to get to heaven with me. I want to be there with you. Come on, get on board. You got to do this. You can't be enslaving people. That's not what God wants us to do. And that was their argument. Let's.
Background to these songs.
Thanks for coming.
I wrote along with some friends, Brecken and Spencer from the Leadership right now. Josh and I lived on Bear Mountain, and when we were looking at the house, I think is when we went to that tavern that Deb talked about where you got to get the breakfast, and we saw the plaque and about Kitty, and that's where we first learned of her story and reached out to Deb, or Deb reached out to us, or we saw a post on Facebook or something. But I found that Deb knew a lot about Kitty Payne's life, I wanted to learn more, and then Josh and I felt inspired to write songs about her story, and
Yeah, I mean, she told me the story, and then Deb came to our house. We talked a lot about it one night, and then I've been writing songs for a number of years, so my wheels started turning about writing like a song, but then it said, well, I can't really tell this story in one song, so it sort of turned into like, need to write a whole epic, about it. And then we worked on it pretty hard for like a year or so, and then we sort of fell off, and then we'll come back to it every once in a while. I think the goal is to write this music and produce it into a play, and then so there's like acted out scenes, and then it cuts back and forth from the band. And it would be very cool. It's like a very ambitious project, but we're just going to keep chipping away at it.
we're halfway through the songs.
Yeah. All right.
We'll play 2 of them. Like Josh mentioned, we play these, we perform these with a larger band. So these 2 sort of lend themselves to being performed as just a duet. So we'll do, this first one is just an intro to the story overall. So this one is
What's it called?
it's called The Child Zone.
Wow. Oh.
The next song that we're not going to perform, we sort of, it all goes in sort of a sequence, chronological order. So, but we're going to skip that one.
Yeah, that's the story of them on the wagon on the way up to Gettysburg. It's beautiful.
Oh, it's fantastic.
So this next one, the lyrics were written by Bevin and the music by Josh. And this is Kitty on the mountain, just feeling troubled, and something's not quite right. This one is called
Up on This Mountain,
Up on This Mountain.
which will probably be it's like the working title of the whole show.
Guess I'll call home. Even with the freedom given us, I can't help to fear the unknown. I got work, scrubbing clothes, a roof over our heads, but I can't shake this worry in my bones. Not far from this mountain, not so long ago, I had my entire family, my strength to face the unknown. But my man and my baby died in Fairfield. Now I got 3 children on my own. Lord help me, Lord protect us. 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 Up on this mountain, the sun is sinking low. I will take the freedom given us and make this place our home. I will take the freedom given us and make this place our home.
Thank you. So we'll keep working on it. We're going to be performing at like October 7th at the Majestic for the People's Project.
Ooh.
So I think we're going to do like what we have done so far at that show. So
Good news.
Honey on the Rocks is the band name. So, yeah, we've got that. Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you. Thank you.